Hello and welcome to the MovieKing Podcast. My name is David Jurmann and I'll be your host. On today's episode, I'm going to review the movie The Mandalorian and Grogu. So, I think Star Wars has been on a bit of a decline in recent years. It feels like it's been downhill for a while, ever since the original trilogy ended, and that was a long time ago. But it's kind of had its ups and downs. I feel like lately it's been even worse, though, than it had been in the last couple decades. The prequels, of course, were kind of hated when they first came out, or maybe not hated, but they were considered massive disappointments. But now they've been getting a lot of newly found praise from people after the last trilogy of films released under Disney, since they purchased Lucasfilm. Since those films came out, a lot of people have been, newly fond of the prequels, and I think Disney's era of Star Wars has been pretty iffy, to say the least. I mean, you had The Force Awakens, which is widely liked by audiences and critics. The same goes for Rogue One, despite having a significant amount of reshoots. Then you had The Last Jedi, which completely divided the Star Wars fandom, and, I've actually grown to really like that movie. I mean, when I first saw it, I was kind of mixed on it. The more I've rewatched it, the more I've been like, that was actually a really enjoyable film. I mean, sure, it has some problems, but I liked it. And then you had Solo, a Star Wars story, which no one really cared for in a good or bad way. It was just everyone just kind of agreed it was whatever. Didn't make a lot of money. And then you had The Rise of Skywalker, which felt like a course correction of The Last Jedi to a very concerning degree, where it tried to overcompensate on fan service, and as a result, is a very bad movie. On the TV side of things, though, they had The Mandalorian, which for the first two seasons also united critics and audiences alike. People really liked it. The same goes for Andor. Not so much for Obi-Wan Kenobi and Ahsoka. There are a few other shows, but the main ones I'll be talking about here are The Mandalorian, for obvious reasons, and The Book of Boba Fett. And look, I was in on the hype of the first two seasons of The Mandalorian. It was an awesome show that felt super high budget for a series and was a lot of fun. Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni seemed to have a really good understanding of what the Star Wars fandom wanted and needed at the time. So I and a lot of other people wanted them to kind of take over the reins at Lucasfilm. Kathleen Kennedy was in charge, but look, I'm sure she's a very good producer. Like, she's been around for a long time in Hollywood, but what she did for Star Wars, I think, was very problematic. She had just so many people. Like, she was giving deals to a lot of people to make movies, and a lot of them didn't end up working out, and a lot of them left over creative differences. And the one that still bothers me to this day is actually Solo, a Star Wars story, because you had Phil Lord and Christopher Miller involved to direct it, and they're like some of my favorite directors in Hollywood, literally just coming off of Project Hail Mary right now. And look, their version of a Solo movie was going to be very goofy and cartoonish, and that's not really what I would expect out of a Star Wars movie, but honestly, given their track record, even at the time when they were making the movie, their track record was so solid that I would not get rid of them for someone else. Like, I would trust them with every fiber of my being to make a good movie. Even if I was the head of Star Wars and I wasn't, like, really loving the direction they were taking it in, I would still just keep them on because they are such good filmmakers that I would really want to trust them. But Kathleen Kennedy got rid of a lot of people, and even for The Rise of Skywalker, I mean, you had Colin Trevorrow involved with that film, and I think his finale in Jurassic World Dominion was even worse than The Rise of Skywalker ended up being. But at least his vision was going to be a continuation of The Last Jedi, not like a retcon of it. So I think Dave Filoni and Jon Favreau at the time just seemed like a really good option to kind of take over Lucasfilm. And really, that did end up happening just recently. They actually did end up taking over for Kathleen Kennedy. But I don't know, after that second season of The Mandalorian, something changed. I'm not sure if it was because of how much people liked the show or the hype people had for Grogu, aka Baby Yoda, but Favreau and Filoni really messed up bad, because after Season 2 had Mando saying goodbye to Grogu, you'd at least expect that it would take another season of the show to see them reunite. But nope, they decided that in the middle of the Book of Boba Fett, a spin-off show, we should have not one but two episodes dedicated to the Mandalorian and how he reunites with Grogu. And first of all, it's insulting to the Boba Fett show because it says nobody thought it could hold up on its own, which honestly just isn't true. Boba Fett is a very big character in Star Wars. I'm sure, if they actually had a really good script and show, it would have been good. And second of all, how stupid is it that you have to watch a different spin off show to understand necessary information that would directly impact a different show entirely? I think that's like a very weird thing, and I never really understand when shows do that. I mean, when I was watching Daredevil on Netflix, they had like season 2 end, and I hadn't watched The Defenders at the time, so I just jumped right into season 3, and I was like, what? How did we get here? And I'm like, oh, I had to watch The Defenders to understand what happened. And I mean, I understand to like, with like Marvel and Star Wars and like these big franchises, I understand that to like a certain degree. You need to watch like the crossover events, but it should not be to this extent where like in Mandalorian, it's like you should not feel lost for something that just happened in your show because you needed to watch a spin-off show. Like that's just not how media should be. It shouldn't feel like homework. And I think it was just also way too soon to have the characters reunite in the first place anyway. But going off that, season 3 of The Mandalorian was also very disappointing and unnecessary. I'm still not sure why Grogu was back so soon. Like, it just didn't impact the story at all. And then they announced this movie, The Mandalorian and Grogu, and to be completely honest, I was not excited for it at all. The idea of it sounded super unnecessary to me and just like a pure cash grab. But to now get on my thoughts on the actual movie, I think it's incredibly mediocre. More specifically, it's the most safe, generic Star Wars movie you can imagine, and if you really like the show, that might work for you. You might be like, oh, you know what? That was just exactly how I remember the show being. I like that a lot. But if you think that as a movie, it should be more interesting, larger scale, and more character driven than the series, you'll probably be as unimpressed as I was. For one, I have no idea why they thought the best story for a Mandalorian theatrical movie would be related to the Hutts. And don't get me wrong, Rada is probably the best character in this movie. As far as like character arcs go, as far as development goes, Rada is probably the one with the most development. But there were so many more interesting avenues they could have gone down. I think part of it is Dave Filoni just being very obsessed with his Clone Wars stuff and wanting to tie it all together. I mean, we did that even in The Mandalorian. Like, why is Ahsoka here? I don't know, because you like having nostalgia. Why is Rada here? Because, Rada was a character in the Clone Wars. It's like, it doesn't need to all connect. I feel like you can have projects just be standalone. We don't need to see like our, action figures coming together. Like, it just doesn't, it's not how you should do it. I think you need to be more independent. And I think that's kind of where my concern comes in with Favreau and Filoni taking over. Is just that they seem very heavy on nostalgia, and like Andor was so good because it was so standalone. And it's like it took a character I did not think I'd care about at all after Rogue One, and made me actually really invested in that show. But here it just feels very, I don't know, it just feels like the wrong idea. And I also think this movie is super unfocused. It starts off with this great opening scene where Mando is taking down people and shooting a bunch of bad guys from the Empire. Really badass. And the movie even sets up this mysterious guy from the Empire who is doing a lot of bad. But Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni decided that it actually needs to be more of a small-scale movie and focus much more on the Hutts, because that's what people care about, right? And I think that was the totally wrong decision there. And the even worse decision made is that Mando and Grogu have almost no development in this movie. It's like the Super Mario Galaxy movie, where they have things to do. They have like purpose in the movie, but they don't undergo any character arc or changes. And by the end of the movie, the most you really get out of them is that Mando discovers something about Grogu. And it's not even like a power or anything Grogu has. It's not like, Grogu speaking. It's more like a, oh, you're not just a baby, you're capable of something. And I'm like, why is this what you made this movie for? Like, why is this what I'm supposed to take away from this movie? It just wasn't good enough. I don't know. It could have been so much more. But to the movie's credit, Favreau directs pretty well, as he has in the past, and it's a technically good-looking movie. It's as technically proficient as you'd expect for something from Star Wars, which is probably one of the most, like, advanced, like, in terms of, like, practical and technology and stuff, like, it's one of the most advanced franchises out there. I also want to shout out the score, of course. It's great in the show, too, but I really think the music might be the real MVP of this film. But at the same time, this movie just doesn't feel any bigger or better than what they've been developing on the small screen on Disney Plus. I mean, the show was very big at the time. Like, when it came out, it's like, oh, this looks like a movie. And we've had a lot of shows like that since then. And now, TV's just looked very cinematic. And now that we're getting this movie, we're watching it and being like, this actually doesn't really feel like a movie. This feels more like the show. And I think they could have just done more to make it a little bit more cinematic. I mean, I think even, to be completely honest, I think season 1 of The Mandalorian, when you had Greg Fraser as the director of photography, the show actually looks better than the movie. It actually has more, it has better lighting, it has just better shots. And I think a lot of that does come down to who's shooting the thing, but it's just, I think the problem is just that this movie needed to feel more like a movie and not just like Mandalorian DLC of the show. They needed to just do more. And I think besides that opening sequence, maybe a few other small scenes, it just doesn't feel that much bigger. And I think this movie has some fun action for what it's worth that is more or less what I wanted out of a movie like this. There's a nice variety of chases in the sky, on the ground, some good battles, and a nice scene with an AT-AT. I mean, it's great seeing this movie on the big screen, for sure. I mean, I saw it twice, once in 4DX, once in Dolby. Both of them were really, it brought it to life a bit more than it would have been on TV, but I'm just, like, thinking long term. Like, if I watch this movie on TV, it really doesn't feel more cinematic than the show. And, I don't know, it was just very disappointing in that way. I think a lot of this movie is also just too reliant on CGI. Like, just seeing a CGI character fight another CGI character for whatever reason isn't entirely engaging here. It's just not very exciting. When you have the humans involved, like it's a human versus a CGI character, it's a bit more interesting. It's a bit more like, I don't know, for whatever reason, it just feels a little more real, and not just like I'm watching an animated scene. But I think the writing definitely could have been improved here. There's some robotic dialogue and a lot of instances where the movie just actively chooses to make the action sequences less dramatic and high stakes than they should have been. I mean, there's even one fight in the movie where it's like very high stakes. Like what's going on is actually very, like, it could be very dangerous, but they don't tell you why until the fight is almost over. And that just took, like, it took a fight that could have been great and just made it okay. Because it's like, why wouldn't you tell me this in the beginning so it feels more impactful throughout the whole fight? Just a very bizarre decision to me. A lot of things like that throughout the whole movie where I'm just like, you could have made this a lot more exciting, but you just didn't. Like, Mandalorian, almost like an invincible character. Like, he's just beating people up. He's barely taking any punches. And that's not that exciting. I'm like, you gotta weaken him up a little bit. You gotta make him, like, feel a little more like an underdog in these fights. Otherwise, it's like watching a video game or something. I don't know. It's just, it's not that exciting. I would say the pacing is another definite weak point of this movie. It's only 2 hours and 10 minutes, maybe about 2 hours without credits. But I'm not lying to you. If you didn't tell me how long this movie was, I would guess at least 2.5 hours. Probably more like 2 hours and 45 minutes. Like, I think Project Hail Mary went by faster than this movie, and it's at least a half hour longer. So take that for what you will. It's especially noticeable in the second half, I would say, because the first half goes by pretty fine. Like, I was watching the first half being like, you know what, this is like, it's going by pretty fast. But there's a point where the story feels like it may be getting near the end, and then you realize there's still like another 40 plus minutes left. I don't even remember. It might have been closer to an hour. And the third act especially really drags because not enough is happening to make that time spent feel worthwhile. And the lack of character development, the lack of a good story, the lack of strong payoff really begins to add up here because I wasn't excited to see where things were going anymore. Instead, I just kept checking my watch to see when the movie would end because I was getting bored and I was getting tired. And that's not what you want in a movie, especially a Star Wars movie. I mean, this is supposed to be like a really exciting movie. It's supposed to be like one of the biggest sci-fi epics ever, and this movie just didn't feel like that. It felt just like 5 episodes of a show stitched together to make a feature film, and it wasn't anything special. And here's the thing about Mandalorian and Grogu. Here's like the honest truth about it. It's not a movie that I can truly call bad. It's a very competently made film, and there are enjoyable sequences throughout. I think anyone who's calling this like a really terrible movie is being a bit harsh on it. I know I sound like I'm really ripping the movie to shreds here, but it's really not that bad. Pacing aside, I mean, the pacing really made it drag, but other than that, it's not that bad of a movie. There are enjoyable scenes in this film, for sure. But beyond that, there's really not much here. It's incredibly mediocre in every sense of the word. I think mediocre is like the word I really keep coming back to when I think of this movie. Because I'm like, it's not good. It's not like bad. It's just whatever. It's a movie that I can just kind of toss aside and not think about much. And it doesn't feel like a movie that Jon Favreau was even passionate about making, like he was with his other movies, like Iron Man or Chef, or frankly, even the first 2 seasons of The Mandalorian, which he's wrote almost the entirety of the show. Instead, this movie feels more like season 3 of The Mandalorian or The Lion King 2019, and not to say that he didn't care about those projects. I don't know, maybe he did. But in watching them, I didn't feel like he cared. I didn't feel like there were passion projects of his that he really wanted to make. I felt like they were uninspired and lacked creative vision. I felt like he was just kind of making them in his sleep. Like, he just wasn't really putting that much effort in. It was just kind of like, I'm getting paid well, whatever, people will watch it. But that's just not how these movies should be made, especially if he's running Lucasfilm. I want to feel passion behind these movies. I don't want to feel like this is just, a moneymaker that exists because people like Baby Yoda and want to spend money on him. That's not what I want out of Star Wars. I want to see good quality storytelling like Andor. And when it comes to Star Wars, I think a lot of movies that have come out, have been pretty hit or miss at this point. Of course, you have the original trilogy, which stands the test of time and is an overall very good set of movies. I mean, even Return of the Jedi aside, which I think is a bit of a downgrade over the other 2 films, still a good movie. But then you have the prequels and the sequels, which aren't great as a whole. I think prequels as a whole, 2 out of 3 aren't good. Revenge of the Sith is a solid film. Not great, but solid. And then you have the sequels, which I would say, honestly, 2 out of 3 were enjoyable to me, but The Rise of Skywalker actually made both of them worse. My least favorite Star Wars movies are Episode 2, Attack of the Clones, the animated Clone Wars movie, and The Rise of Skywalker. And now say what you want about something like The Rise of Skywalker, it is a poorly made film, and that movie is pretty bad, but something that it's not is boring. Something that it's not is nothing. And The Mandalorian and Grogu is a nothing movie. It's the type of movie you can watch and tolerate, and you won't really hate it or anything. You're not gonna want to walk out, like throw a tantrum like you did with The Last Jedi, but it's just not a movie you're gonna think about again. Want to put it on, again, unless it's for your kids or something. This movie is very much like Solo, a Star Wars movie in that regard. It's just a very whatever movie that I will probably never want to think about again after this leaves theaters. Probably won't even watch clips of online because it's not even that good. Even though this is an objectively better movie than the worst Star Wars has to offer, there's just a good chance I would rather rewatch the bad movies over this because at least I'd feel something. And I think that's something not enough people talk about is like, a bad movie is bad, but at least you feel something out of it a lot of the time. Like, a movie like this is just a movie that is very safe, very watchable, but a movie that I felt nothing during. And I could certainly rate this movie lower than I will just because of how I feel about it. I mean, in my heart, like, this is kind of like a C- movie just because I really didn't like it. It's not a good movie. But I don't think that would be totally fair here since, as I said, it's just not a bad movie. But if this is the state of Star Wars right now, I think fans should be pretty worried. These movies used to be big events that everyone would run out to and see. And now a Star Wars movie isn't even remotely as popular as a new R-rated horror movie like Obsession or Backrooms. Both movies directed by YouTubers in their 20s. I mean, think about that. Like, YouTubers in their 20s are directing movies that are bigger than Star Wars. How is that possible? I don't understand. Like, it's horror movies against Star Wars. And these are like small independent horror movies. I mean, these cost like next to nothing to make. Not next to nothing, but, Mandalorian and Grogu probably cost like almost 100 times more money than those. And they're making a crazy amount of money. People are more interested in those than Star Wars, and that's crazy to me. And I think that really just tells you everything you need to know about the state of Star Wars and also the quality of this movie and how this movie really is. And also how much better those other movies are. So, I don't know. I just can't really recommend The Mandalorian and Grogu. I would say if you're going to watch this one, probably just stream it, honestly. Like, it feels like a TV movie. And I think seeing this in theaters will just reinforce that, they should make more movies like this, which I don't think should happen. Go see Obsession or go see Backrooms. Those movies are passion projects that deserve your money. I love Boosters even. I mean, I saw that film. Wasn't huge on it, but that also was a passion project that someone put a lot of time and effort into. And I felt that effort much more than Mandalorian and Grogu. So, I don't know. I'm going to have to give Mandalorian and Grogu a C. And that about does it for this episode. If you want to follow my reviews, you can find me on Letterboxd at MovieKing1224. You can also listen to this podcast on your favorite apps such as Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Amazon Music. If you have any comments or feedback, I would love to hear it and improve this show. And of course, if you've enjoyed this episode, please consider liking, subscribing, and hitting the notification bell to hear more like it. I appreciate you all so much for listening, and I'll talk to you next time. Thank you. Bye-bye.